enforcer.
I believe they're called enforcers, Gordon. I sell women's shoes.
And the Stallion.
Stallion, baby! I am not what you would call a handsome man. I'll kick you in the nuts and you'll smile at me and like it. Oh, nice! Wow!
Another shitty, rainy day here on Long Island, and here we are back at the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast. How's that for an intro? Really gets people sucked in, huh?
Yeah, suck is a good word.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast. He is your host. He is the Stallion. I'm the piece of shit that sits next to him, known as the Enforcer, and we are back for yet another week here. Huh?
I'm sure you're really excited about it.
I'm stoked. Like. Yeah, are you excited? I'm excited.
Yeah, sure.
It's pouring. It's like a hurricane or something. Just drove like 45 minutes on the Long Island Expressway, which is Satan's nuts anyway. Anyway,
I'm starting to understand why we have 100% abandonment on our show most of the time.
What are you talking about? Pulling back the curtain, huh? So, listen, we dropped the ball last week in, a couple of different aspects of our life, I feel like.
Several.
One would be the what?
Many.
Many?
I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. Would you like to detail all of the aspects?
I think you had it covered. So you got it.
Yeah. We did not do No Mercy predictions. We had hoped to do something on Saturday night, and Saturday night didn't happen. Really kind of kicked us in the nuts. He ran into the goon, Bill Irwin, if you will. Early to mid-90s WWE superstar. Was he also Abe Knuckleball Schwartz? No, he wasn't, right? The goon was just the goon?
Yeah.
Was there nobody else? He wasn't another gimmick? Well, the goon is a bozo, but we got a chance to, see him on Saturday. It was cool, hanging out with him. He wore his skates. He was carried around a hockey stick. That was something. Anyway, we watched No Mercy, and that was. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get some of our football picks in, but there's been a lot of scuttlebutt on the internets lately, and I've got something to say about that.
I'm disgusted.
This goes for a lot of people. Breaking news. I'm breaking this for all you dirt sheet readers, internet marks, and whatever else you want. Not everything you read on the internet is true. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by this, because I've been doing a lot of thinking. In terms of professional wrestling, not in terms of like politics and stuff like that, because that's a horse of a different color. WrestleMania 4 is still my favorite. Thanks, Donnie. So, I would say about 3 or 4 weeks ago, everywhere in terms of you read on any pro wrestling website was how much heat Enzo Amore had, correct?
True.
That was a big thing. Everybody, the office hated him. Everybody hated him in the locker room. They were going to bury him. And now what? It's a month and a half, 6 weeks later, I should say. He main events a segment on Monday Night Raw. And he's the king of 205 Live, which is, I'm sorry, he's not the king of the cruiserweights, but he's the stalwart. Well, that's a good word. Feel free to Google that one. Of 205 Live, and they're saying they're gonna push him to the moon, and he's ratings and whatnot. And 6 weeks ago, you would think the guy was as good as fired after his feud with Big Cass. Before that, I would say one of the big things was Brock Lesnar was leaving WWE to return to UFC. Remember that story?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my mind, both of those stories, the WWE used in storyline, right? How Brock or Paul Heyman said Brock was going to go back to the UFC if he lost the 4-way match at
SummerSlam.
At SummerSlam, thank you. And last week on Monday Night Raw, Enzo got his ass kicked by the entire locker room, playing up to everybody hating Enzo Amore. I'm what you call a skeptic, Joe. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think the WWE is the one leaking all of this rhetoric to the dirt sheets, who's then reporting it as a fact, and then in turn using it in storyline. I think it was all an inside job, man. I think that's what they're doing because it's the only way to, I guess, to keep, not the only way, but it's one of the, it's a cheap way to get, I guess, people talking and eyes on the product is by leaking, quote unquote, leaking something. But all you're doing is you're planting. It's a plant, Joe. It's all a work. Everything is a work. That's how I feel. And that, oh my gosh, I have a good idea. We could do we could play a drop of like change dropping, and I could say that's my 2 cents. Getting that for next week.
I'll work on that.
Yeah. Let's go on the list. But what do you think? You think that's true, or talk to me?
Well, I guess I would say, as far as stories and information leaking or coming from WWE or within inside of it, I don't know where else it would come from, right? Like any of these stories that come out, whether it's fact or fiction or speculation, it's coming from someone inside the organization, right? Whether it's, an agent or an official that's leaking it to a dirt sheet, or wrestlers that are leaking it to a dirt sheet, or they're just honestly giving answers about questions or whatever it might be. So I think that, all these, no one really outside of WWE has information unless they get it. They're getting it from somebody inside the organization. So I guess that would be the first thing. And as far as those two specific examples, the Brock UFC thing, I don't know. I mean, obviously he wanted to go back last year, and he did the match with Mark Hunt, and after the whole thing with he did the feud with Ambrose, and then he kind of took time off and went back. So then they came to the agreement of letting him do it. So he seemed like he was interested in at least in some capacity going back. I think his contract is up with WWE. I want to say next year. I could be wrong about that. We'd have to check. So of course the stories are going to be out there that is he going to resign or is he going to go back to UFC, and then how's that all going to shake out? There were the rumors of him potentially fighting John Jones towards the end of this year, and then that fell through because Jones got himself suspended again, right? So, but
Brock is still technically suspended from the State Athletic Commission too.
I thought that ran out. No, isn't it like a year?
I thought it was 2 years. It could have been a year. I thought it was 2 years, but yeah. So because after he tested positive, I know they suspended him for a year. Not a bad gig though. You test positive. You forfeit your whatever part of your purse was. You still make a couple of million. You go make money doing WWE, and then you come back to the UFC, and you really never served your suspension. All you did was take some time off and professionally wrestle. That's a good gig.
Yeah. And as far as the Enzo stuff goes, I don't know. It's hard to say whether all these stories about him being annoying backstage are true or not. It could just be stuff that gets embellished or what have you. I mean, he came all the way up through NXT and their system, and had the run with Big Cass as a tag team for a long while, and then they split. What I had always been hearing was, as annoying as he was and as much trouble as he may or may not have been causing, he was still selling merchandise, and his segments on Raw were decently rated comparative to other segments on Raw. So even though maybe he was not well liked as a person, he was still making them money. So they were still featuring him, at least at some level. Now that Cass got hurt, they moved him to 205 Live. That was something that was suggested, I believe, by a couple of different folks. I know Jericho was one that had suggested doing that to try to bring ratings and viewers over to 205 Live, which is a show that's been struggling since they started it. So that's what they've done, and they turned him heel essentially this past week. Some of his actions when he beat Neville for the Cruiserweight title, and then having all the cruiserweights kind of banned against him. And he is pretty annoying on TV, too. I think his act run pretty dry, especially without Cass now. It's kind of just pretty old and played out, and I think people are starting to be into it less and less and less. Whether that impacts his merchandise sales and whatever else they're concerned about, time will tell. But
do you think those stories about him being that annoying are true? Or is that, the WWE or people on the inside letting those stories get out, so it inevitably, if you are going to turn him heel, you kind of already think he's a douche, and they're working, quote-unquote, the smarks.
Yeah, I'm sure there's at least some level of truth to the stories that there are, right? That whole story about him on the bus and almost getting thrown off, and old Roman throwing him off the bus and stuff like that. I'm sure that's at least somewhat true. I don't know why they would concoct a story like that. It's so detailed and have it not be true. The fact that they decided to use it on air, they're probably taking advantage of some real life stuff that's happened, and they seem to be doing that here and there at different parts of the show. Miz obviously has brought it up in interviews with Enzo, and then Miz has done other things, these shoot style type back and forth that these guys have. Cena and Roman did that a lot in the build up to their match at No Mercy last week.
Overdid it, maybe some would say.
So they're doing that more these days. So I guess I would say that they are exploiting some of this backstage stuff to try to turn it into more compelling television, I would say.
Well, I mean, apparently it's working because we just go into a little bit of Monday Night Raw. So the whole Enzo shit, right? Like he's a heel. Neville's Enzo was a face going into Sunday Night No Mercy, right?
Right.
And Neville was the heel. He was the long reigning heel champion. Enzo cheats to win the title. The next night, you inevitably turn Enzo heel. Not inevitably, like obviously, because he buried everybody else in the locker room. He buried the heels. He buried the faces. You turn him heel in front of the crowd, so they start booing him, and then you have all the locker room beat the hell out of him. It wouldn't, but to me that kind of gives him. It didn't really make the whole I guess turn, if you will, didn't really make sense to me, because ideally, if you're going to have a bunch of people beat somebody up, you wanted to gain sympathy. I kind of was just like, yeah, good, yeah, like good, good for them, So it didn't. I didn't watch 205 Live, admittedly. Did you?
No.
See that
long running streak of never watching 205 Live.
I think I watched maybe the first month, and I haven't since then. But also, to be fair, I mean, they're not booking 205 Live well at all. There's such a lack of character development, and nobody cares about it. But so that whole Enzo thing to me did make a lot of sense on Raw, at least, and maybe we'll just get them only on 205 Live. I hope. I don't think that's going to happen, but who knows?
No, I think their formula is, do stuff on Monday to build to, 205 Live on Tuesday. That seems to be their pattern.
So, is there anything else on Raw that really stuck out to you?
I mean, there was a lot of guys missing from the show, so there was stuff that just didn't, like Brock wasn't on the show, Cena was not on the show. They did Roman against Miz. They seem to be setting up a Shield reunion, right, with those guys against the Miz Taraj, because I guess they don't have any other 3-man units to team them up against.
Nope,
so.
But you have an Intercontinental Champion in Miz, so maybe you could do something with the belts. As long as it's not Jason Jordan, I'm cool with it,
Yeah, I don't know. They don't seem to. I think at one point there was a plan to have Roman win it. I don't know if that's still the plan or not, but I think that changed. So I don't know. I mean, this just seems like it's a holdover because they need to somehow get to Survivor Series. They have this extra pay-per-view in October now to get through on the Raw side. And
what's the name of that one?
TLC is the
TLC,
October
right.
show, which I think was the show that the Shield debuted as a team, right, in 2012, 13.
Is that when Seth Rollins took the table bump from like 40 feet up?
Yeah. I think it was
that
2012.
in New York? That was in New York, wasn't it? That was the Coliseum, I think.
I don't think it was the Coliseum.
Now I'm going to look it up while you talk.
I think it was TLC 2012, I'm going to say, because CM Punk was the champion at that time.
Okay.
So that would be the show. But I guess they're trying to use the Shield reunion as a way to get people interested in the current TLC pay-per-view for lack of any other feuds and stuff going on.
Barclays. Wasn't Coliseum, you're right.
Yeah. I think it was in the area. So that was that. I guess that's really what's coming up for TLC. I don't know what other feuds or angles they will be setting up for that show. Obviously, just came off of this No Mercy pay-per-view, so they've got a few weeks to build it up.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, with so many people missing from the show, it was just a steady dose of Roman and The Miz. I mean, they were in like 3 or 4 segments, each, so which is fine. But again, you've got a 3-hour show to fill, and you're not going to have a lot of your heavy hitters on there.